for coming, everybody, and welcome to Once Upon a Town. I'm Joe Landry, and this is Scott Mason.
Hi, folks.
So today we're going to talk about the James M. Stewart block. And that's the block that's on the town bridge right there, where it meets the triangle. And we're going to talk about the four buildings that stood there before the building that we know today. The Home Bakery buildings, the Harry Batchelor Store building, the Smith W. Thayer Shoe Store building, and the William Jordan Barbershop building. And my sources of information are the Franklin Register, Franklin's first newspaper. It actually started right in that block. We'll talk about that. The Franklin Sentinel, Stanley Chilson Collection, the Sanborn Fire Insurance Maps, very helpful. And personal pictures and postcards that people have given me or let me take pictures of, and been able to get a lot of good information that way. And of course, the Franklin Historical Museum. It's definitely a good place to go. Scott, is your train setup still there?
A little late.
No,
the exhibit ended this past Sunday.
Okay.
And they're being crated up tomorrow
Yeah.
and taken back to the DPW warehouse.
Okay.
They're going to go into storage until December of 2027.
27. Okay.
And when they come back out to go on exhibit, there's going to be a new diorama, and there's going to be an addition to the diorama that features the train station.
Cool. All right.
So there'll be a lot of new things to see.
Excellent. Okay. So the James M. Stewart block. This is a Google Earth picture, and it shows the four buildings where they were located. You can see the new building, the what's there today. It's like a shape of a V. You got the Home Bakery building. It was over on West Central Street. The Harry Batchelor building, the Smith Thayer Shoe Store building, and the William Jordan Barbershop building. And here's a map that dates back to 1876, and you can see the triangular property right there. You can see it says James M. Stewart. There's so much information on this old map. It's unbelievable. I mean, all these names are familiar to me because I've done so much of the research. But you see like names like Dr. William B. Nolan. You see A.A. Russick, part of it. D.C. Cotton would be Daniel C. Cotton. It's a lot of good information all crammed in there, but it's really been really helpful.
And that's not a Sanborn map, correct?
No, that's not a Sanborn map. It actually is. It's not that one there, but about the same time frame for the one over there.
Okay.
Yeah. And the triangular piece of land was owned by James M. Stewart, and he was the editor and the proprietor of the Franklin Register, which we talked about, the first newspaper. Yep. And then the 1879 detail shows the triangular piece from a different angle. No, same angle, actually. You can see the few of the buildings that are there at that time, 1879. And then in 1888, new buildings are there, and this is looking at it from a different angle, and you can see Main Street, and you can see West Central Street, although it was Central Street back then. Now it's West Central.
It's crazy to look at how much growth took place in 11 years.
Oh, I know it. Unbelievable. Yeah, you can see the Metcalf block has now been built. Yeah, the Buttman block right there next to it. The barbershop building has now been built. And yeah, a lot of growth since the previous map. And here's one of those Sanborn maps. And there's the property lines of the block. And you can see the arrows pointing to a little piece of the piazza. Some people call it piazza, porch, whatever. They call it a piazza. There's a little bit of the piazza that's over the property line. We're going to talk about that. There's an interesting story about that. So this notice appeared in the Franklin Register in April of 1874. The property at the corner of Main and Central Streets was up for sale, and it included a two-story building that was occupied in part by Brown and Rogers. The picture from 1868 shows the store being operated as M. Brown Dry Goods. And according to that notice, the owner at the time was H. M. Green. So it was up for sale. And then this notice appeared in the Franklin Register in June of 1874. It said that the Franklin Register, the town's newspaper, had moved to that building, and the property had recently been purchased by the owner of the Franklin Register, James M. Stewart. So he was technically one of the first ones that owned the block. I call it the James M. Stewart block. Technically brought it from H.M. Green, but we'll call it the Stewart block. And they actually started the publishing in that building. And then, in February of 1883, James Stewart sold the property to Charles M. Buttman. And this article states that Mr. Buttman's store was in a building on that block. And now it's possible that his store was in the building that Harry Batchelor operated, because Mr. Buttman constructed a new building to the left of the Metcalf block around that time. So it's possible that that's what happened. He probably had his store in that building and moved it out, and Mr. Batchelor took it over. That's just an educated guess on my part, though. I don't have anything really that proves that, but it's around that time frame, so that's a pretty good guess, I think.
It's a little out of focus, but I thought it said Batman.
I know, yeah.
And I always wondered what Batman's first and middle initials were, so.
Yeah.
CM.
Huh. Wow, okay. And now we'll examine the 4 buildings that stood on that block. And we'll start over on West Central Street side and work around to Main Street. The first one we'll talk about is the Home Bakery building. And the picture shows the Home Bakery building, but at the time of this picture, it was called Elkerton's, and we'll mention that in a few minutes. But I just wanted to, it was a really good picture of the building, so I figured I'd show it. This 1894 detail from the Sanborn map shows the Home Bakery building on West Central Street. And there was actually a small building to the left of it that was part of the bakery. You can see that there. And so, according to the article from November of 1886, the Home Bakery was taken over by Getchell and Batchelor from a Mr. N.S. Grow. It shows a Mr. Batchelor as a co-owner, and it's likely that Mr. Batchelor was that Harry Batchelor that took over the other building. And they were actually connected, so that kind of makes sense. And so if you look at it says, having purchased the bakery from H.N.S. Grow, they're going to put in a brick oven and whatever, et cetera. We're going to sell Vienna bread, donuts every morning, et cetera. So quite a little bakery going there. And then in June of 1892, Erastus L. Metcalf, he was the grandfather of Lorraine Metcalf, he bought the bakery. It was now known as the Cooks Brothers Bakery. But in June of 1900, the bakery was taken over by William Elkerton, and he opened the bakery as soon as the necessary repairs were made. So now it became Elkerton's.
One of the common threads to all of these presentations, Joe, is the fact that none of these businesses stayed with one ownership for very long.
That's true.
They changed hands a lot.
And a lot of times the owners, employees of the place became the new owner. Yeah. And so many of that happening. The drugstores, and it's a lot of them, yeah. Grocery stores, things, yeah. 1 week later, a fire was discovered in the closet in the room above the oven at the rear of the building, and it spread into the roof. But the cause was believed to be spontaneous combustion. The fire was quickly put out, and Mr. Elkerton resumed business the following day. Wow, a bakery and they had a fire, and they resumed business the next day. So, couldn't have been too bad of a fire. Now, let's see. Oh, and then Wallace Elkerton and Mr. Hannaford of Mansfield purchased the bakery business of Elkerton and Son, and it was now known as Elkerton and Company. The new concern purposed to push things and proposes to maintain a high standard of excellence. Charles Elkerton will pay more attention to the Norwood Bakery, which is developing an excellent business. So,
he's ditching Franklin.
He's ditching Franklin. Now the Harry Batchelor store, and that building was part of the bakery, so that kind of makes sense that Harry Batchelor was part of that. And you can see in this picture the porch is gone now, or the piazza as we call it. Now this picture dates back to 1868, and it was part of the James Stewart block, and it was, at the time, it was M. Brown Dry Goods doing business there, and the piazza was removed. So if you kind of run your eye along the property line, the front of the buildings that were there, you can kind of see where that little corner of that the piazza is sticking over a little bit. Because back then, they probably didn't care too much. It wasn't a big deal.
This is interesting. They were standing on the bridge.
Yeah.
Not an automobile to be found.
Nope, not back then. And now here's an advertisement that appeared in the Franklin Register in June of 1874. And it says that A. McConkey was doing business in the Stewart's block. He was a merchant mailer, and his store had a splendid assortment of goods for gentlemen's wear. Nice. Stewart's block. The arrow is pointing to Harry Batchelor's store. The piazza is shown in the 1894 detail, but it had been removed by the time the picture was taken. And then the next building around the corner is the Smith W. Thayer shoe store building. And that's the building, that's the store right there. That's taken from the 1888 drawing of Franklin. Now this picture was taken in 1907, and the arrow is pointing to the building where Smith Thayer did his business. The sign shows E.A. Moore as the owner, but Ethan Allen Moore bought it in later years. So this is a picture from 1907. And we know this is 1907 because if you see in the red building, that's the Metcalf block, which is there today. And it says the Burns Clothing Company there. Now, we were talking about this before we came on the program. Mr. Burns had to move his business up to the second floor of the Metcalf block because he was doing business in the where the Felix J. Cataldo block is today. But when they were going to build the Felix Cataldo block, they were going to tear down the buildings that were there, and that's where Burns was doing business. So they said, well, he's got to move out of there temporarily, and when they build a new block, you can move back, which they did. So temporarily, he was upstairs in the second floor of the Metcalf block, and there was a music hall up there when the building was first built, and that's why he was doing business up there. Actually, Simon and Son was actually up there too, because Simon had to move out of the building that they were at. So they also were up there at one point. So here's a notice that from Franklin Register in 1875. It talks about Smith Thayer, who is now occupying his boot and shoe shop on Main Street. And the editor is mentioned in this article was James M. Stewart, the owner of the Franklin Register. So it says he's now occupying his boot and shoe shop, which this editor has fitted up for him. And it is one of the neatest, most convenient places for that business which we have never seen. Ask Thayer if he likes his new place, if you want to see how enthusiastic a man can be. I love these.
Little editorializing there.
Oh, I'll tell you, the Sentinel was full of those. It's really comical when you think about it. Yeah. And then here's an advertisement from the 1884 Franklin Business Directory, and also the Sentinel from 1883. And we're going to enlarge the shop by about 6 feet of room between the old store and the new barber shop. So I think looking at the other picture, you could kind of see a big gap there, and then all of a sudden there was something there. So I think that's what they were talking about.
An amazing amount of redundancy in the types of stores that existed.
Oh, yeah.
Multiple shoe stores, multiple clothing stores, multiple barbers, multiple bowling alleys.
Oh, bowling, I know it.
In the previous slide, you got a clothing store on the point of that corner.
Yep.
2 buildings down, you got another clothing store.
Oh, yeah. In some cases, you had grocery stores right beside each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the store was occupied by Smith Thayer, is being remodeled. They will be occupied by E.M. Lewis around the 1st of August. So that's what happened there.
Did those streetcar tracks go right over the bridge?
They did. Yep. They did. Yep, those were down. They were laid down in 1900. They took them up in 1924. But yeah, those tracks went over that bridge. Yeah.
They went over the bridge and they went to rent them, but there was a siding, if you will, that went down Alpine Place, and there's a building on Alpine Place that was a single-car trolley barn, and it's still there today. And if you go down there, you can see the peaked. It's got a strange roof to it, and it was a clear story roof that allowed light to come in.
Oh,
It's still there.
On the left or the
It's
right?
on the left.
On the left.
Yeah, it's an apartment now.
that's interesting. Oh, never knew that. Oh, good information.
The trolleys went right to the King Philip Ballroom.
They did, yeah.
Right, yeah.
I think I seen a postcard with
You're right, yeah. And so in September of 1903, it was reported that Officer F.L. Davis had placed an attachment on the Irwin Shoe Store on behalf of the landlord, Charles Buttman. Smith Thayer continued to do business there as a keeper. And then in October of 1903, Mr. Thayer took over the store, the Irwin Shoe Store, so formerly known as the Irwin Shoe Store. Now, in 1905, over at the Opera House block, there was another man over there doing business, E.A. Moore. That's Ethan Allen Moore. He was an anatomical shoemaker. And his advertisement in 1906 said, "Not every man will bow down to everybody, but E.A. Moore will get right down on his knees before any lady or gentleman to measure them for a nice fitting shoe." Wow. Okay. So the reason we talk about Ethan Allen Moore is because he had purchased the well-known shoe stand of Smith Thayer on Main Street when ill health had compelled him to give up the active business. So Mr. Moore would remove his cobbling establishment to his new store, which he will restock and increase. And Mr. Thayer would remain with him for the present. So he moved from the Opera House over to that place. Here's a picture I got from one of the business directories, and it shows Ethan Allen Moore Shoe Store. And yeah, I'm not sure which gentleman in the picture was Ethan Allen Moore, but I would assume one of them is. Probably the guy on the far right,
Yeah, I would think so.
because
yeah.
he was actually getting up in years, so I think it's probably him. Yeah, actually, yeah, that to me it makes sense. And then in 1906, he received a large lot of men's shoes that were made for the U.S. Army, but they were no longer used by the Army because they changed their style of shoe. He sold them for $2.45 per pair as long as they lasted. They will probably not last more than 10 days, not 30 days at the most, and I advise the people of Franklin to embrace this opportunity. And then here's an advertisement. We will sell these in single pairs at 35 cents without guarantee. At $2 a box, 6 pairs in a box, we'll give a guarantee for 6 months.
That's it, huh? 6 months?
That's it.
Maybe that's why the Army didn't want them anymore.
Well, actually, this is, I think, a different one now.
Ah.
Yeah. It's hosiery, so. Okay. And then in March of 1920, Robert Doherty, he had worked with Ethan Allen Moore. He purchased the business due to Mr. Moore's declining health, and he died. Mr. Moore died in September of 1924. And there's Mr. Doherty in the window, in the door. Yeah. He is a wide-awake young man and popular, and looks for a share of public patronage. But in February of 1925, he had to get out because that block was going to be torn down. So Mr. Doherty was notified that the building was going to be torn down, and he needed to vacate as soon as possible. So the advertisement on the left shows that he had to vacate the property by March 1st, and this is 1925. And he moved his business further down to Main Street, down to the Fletcher block, down near where Connie's drugstore used to be. And that's where he did business until the new block was built. And we'll talk about the block as a whole in a few minutes. And the last building on that block that we'll talk about is the William Jordan Barbershop building. In 1894, that's a detail, and it shows that there was a pool room on the second floor. Yeah. And he was a hairdresser on Main Street. He lived at 23 Cottage Street. A lot of these old directories, they tell you not only where the business was, they tell where the person lived. And then Harry Bullocken bought the block. And there's a story to that. In March of 1920, Harry Bullocken purchased the Buttman property, which included the Elkerton Bakery building, the Harry Batchelor Store building, the Ethan Allen Moore building, and the Jordan building, the barbershop building. Now, in October of 1922, Harry Bullock made plans to demolish 3 of the buildings on that property, and he would erect a new business block in that location. But when he filed his plans with the town, the selectmen denied his request because the area in front of that building had been used as a roadway for many years, which it still is today, on the bridge. But where the property was out in like a triangle, he owned that property, but the cars were using it and everything. And they said, well, so it's been used as a roadway. So that's why they denied that request. And they said that he no longer had title to that portion of the property. So Mr. Bullock claimed that his deed showed that he owned the triangular piece of land that extended to within 12 feet of the horse trough. But the selectmen petitioned the land court for a ruling, and in December of 1922, the court sided with the town. They ruled that Mr. Bullock could only claim the land that went beyond the building lines that had been occupied by that piazza, that little tiny little piece. That's the only part of the property that he could claim, and the piazza was gone. So, it's a lot of good that little piece of land's going to do him, huh? So, yeah. That's why I kept pointing out that little piece. So, poor Harry Bullock, he said after I said enough is enough. So he sold it to Leo Flax. In December of 24, Harry Bullock decided to sell the property to Leo Flax of Cambridge because the litigation over the property lines discouraged him in his plans to redevelop the block. But the new owner had his own plans for the block. He decided to tear down some of the buildings on the block and would erect a new business block that would contain 7 or 8 small stores. Work would begin immediately on the following spring.
I think this was an amazing amount of work you did to unravel this ball of yarn.
Oh,
There's so many owners.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Yeah.
The other thing too is that, and in our audience today is Mrs. Bazanti. I'm sorry, I'm pointing you out. You're not on camera right now, but I heard you earlier. I heard you can get me back later. I heard you talking earlier about quote unquote the good old days, right? And we've seen so much change in Franklin just in our lifetimes, but in the span of about 25 or 30 years, this one little block has changed 17 times. I mean, between new construction and people moving in and out. You can only imagine the uproar from the citizenry back then.
All right. Well, keep in mind, too, this is 1925, right? If somebody left Franklin in, we'll say, 1920, they went away, and they came back in 1930. Now, they're driving down East Central Street, they're coming into town. Think of the changes they would have seen. Right off the bat, they would have looked to the left and said, oh my God, the Morse Opera House block is gone. It's gone, wow. They would look to the right and say, hey, what's this new block over here? That's the A.J. Cataldo block. And then they would continue on, and they would look straight ahead. They say, what the heck is that? Where's Bachelor's building? That's gone. They would turn the corner. They would start going along. They look to the right. Wait a minute. Where's the Cotton House? Where's the Rescue House? Now this new block there's Depot Plaza. They would keep going, and then let's see, what else would they see? That's probably about it. But just that whole downtown area
huge.
in that 10-year period.
That's huge.
Changed so much.
Yep.
Yeah. In the spring of 1925, construction began on the new block of Leo Flax. However, when construction was in progress, controversy would rear its ugly head yet again. Another controversy. It turns out that the newly laid foundation on the Main Street side of this new building was 2 feet over the property line. Here we go again. Construction was halted until the Board of Selectmen could make a ruling. Now, according to this editorial that we see here, Mr. Flax agreed to rectify the situation. He moved the foundation in by 2 feet, even though the foundation for the new block was already in place. I'm kind of wondering if it's underneath the sidewalk. Probably is. Mm. This brought the front of the building in line with the front of the adjacent buildings, like it is today. So I thought about it, says, well, maybe this is what it probably would have looked like. He probably was out by 2 feet like that. So they had to redesign the building a little bit because I'm sure the building was already designed and everything. And it kind of, if you really look at the front of the building, you can kind of see it's not really symmetrical. And I kind of wonder if there was a redesign that took place on that building. But anyway, that's what happened there. The building up on the top there that I've got all crossed out, that building was built about a year later. So that wasn't there when this all went on. In fact, that's where the barbershop building was. They took that out and they put that in there. Actually, we'll talk about that in a minute. So that was part of the demolition that occurred afterwards. But anyway, this is I'm pretty sure this is what happened there. So then Morris Kaplan became the owner of the block. So another changing hands again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in May of 1926, Leo Flax sold the block to Morris Kaplan. He's a well-known boxer who was known in boxing circles as Red Chapman. For approximately $60,000 he bought it for.
He was probably a bleeder.
You think so?
That's why they called him Red.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. And then 3 months later, Mr. Kaplan tore down the William Jordan Barbershop building and built a new building in its place. And that's where we talked about that building was crossed out. And there's that new building. And you can see it's a separate building from the original block that was built in 25. And he constructed that in 1926. Now the front of the new building looks almost like the building that was there already. So if you're looking at it from the street level, you'd say, oh, that's part of the building. But apparently it's not. It's a separate building. But looking from the sky, you can obviously see it's a little different. And then in August of 25, which was 6 months after he moved to 58 Main Street, Robert Doherty moved his store back to the newly constructed Flax block. Actually, it's now the Kaplan block, I guess.
I think you can pretty much call it whatever you want and be pretty accurate.
All right, we'll keep with the Flax block. It's easy. Because he still shows it as a Flax block on the advertisement. So, yeah. And then other stores that came along. The advertisement on the left is from April of 26. Ralph Davis was operating a store as the Economy dry goods store. He was on the West Central Street side. In November of 26, Mr. Davis moved the store to the new building that had just been completed at 8 Main Street and renamed it the Ralph Davis Department Store. And then there was a big sale, 1930. He sold his store and had a closing out sale, as noted in the advertisement. And then it became the Franklin Bargain Store. And then in December of 1932, Robert Doherty sold his business at 4 Main Street to Barnett Kaplan. And he spelled his name C-A-P-L-A-N-D. So at first I thought, oh, Kaplan, but two totally different spellings. And he was a local tailor, and he owned that business until 1963 when he retired. And that was the day he retired. Yeah, that was taken from a Stanley Chilson film. And then this picture was taken from a 1935 Chilson film. It shows the Elite Barbershop when it was in the block. And this shop started doing business here in 1927 when Vincent Pesanti opened the shop. In later years, his sons would also cut hair in that shop too, including his son Edward, who was better known as Chiefy. Chiefy would continue the business after his father retired and would eventually turn the shop over to his son Mike, who would continue to operate that shop after that. And there's the block as it appeared in 1937.
And other than some superficial facade changes,
Right.
it's basically the same.
Right. So eventually you're going to do a model of this building. So this is probably a prototype right here.
Yeah, that's my picture right there.
Right there. Yeah.
They have the grocery store or the barbershop.
Yeah, there was a grocery store there, right?
Strickland and Rustino.
Strickland and Rustino. That's right.
Then A&D.
It might have been that one right there, I bet. Yep.
Can you go back a slide, John?
Sure. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
So it's interesting that the billboard on top, there are still billboards on top of that building now. And again, this is 1932.
1937.
1937.
Yeah.
So back then, a lot of the mills in the towns had their own baseball teams.
That's right.
And that sign is actually representative of one of them, the Clark Cutler McDermott baseball team, known as
That's right.
the Climax
Climax.
AC.
That's right.
And they were around for years and years. They traveled from town to town and actually achieved some notoriety in New England.
Yep, that's what the AC stands for.
Yep. Athletic Club, yeah.
Yep.
And Athletic Club, Climax Athletic Club.
Yeah, but they won a championship, I think it was, didn't they? Yeah.
Didn't the Lucinis play for that team?
Yep. And they were around for decades.
Yeah.
What years you talking?
Oh, well, I don't know what year they started, but that phenomenon of mill baseball teams began in the early 1900s and probably went well into the 60s. And there were a lot of examples of, some of the larger mill towns. Uxbridge, for example, had 3 or 4 different teams. They had their own dedicated fields. And this was just another one. As far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, this was the only mill team in Franklin, at least at that time. Yeah.
That I know of. I know that Stanley Chilson took some movies of the Climax playing a game down, not Fletcher Field, but behind the Theron Metcalf School. And you can see number 5 up there, Benny Gillinado. Yeah. And they show the team playing. They were playing Milford, I think, at this one game. But yeah, they were a very professional team.
Sure. Yeah.
Never knew any of that.
Did Ernie Bartlemay play in that?
Ernie Bartlemay played there
Yep.
too. Yeah. Yeah. Lefty. Yeah.
Was he semi-pro? Yes.
Was he semi-pro? Yeah.
Franny,
Oh, Franny,
Franny was signed by the Cardinals
Oh.
and went away to, as I understand the story, went away to spring training and got homesick.
He was playing before Red Shandy's.
And he was ahead of Red Shandy's, who took his place, and Red ended up in the Hall of Fame.
Ooh.
So, but baseball didn't pay a whole lot in those days, so there were plenty of good jobs to be had back at home that paid the equivalent. So, if you weren't feeling like you were up to it, it probably made sense to not stick with it.
In fact, I know of a story of a pitcher. He pitches, I think it's the Cape League or something. He's got 100 victories. Can you imagine that? 100 victories. I mean, it's unheard of. Let's see. Do you know that guy?
Not well, but
Not well. How many? You won? When did you win your 100th game?
last September.
Last September. Imagine that. And he's still playing.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Too old.
No.
But
100 games.
baseball was so popular back then, and it was such a phenomenon that not only were there baseball teams for the guys, but there were mill softball teams for the women as well.
Wow. Never knew none of that.
Yeah.
There was a field up in Douglas too, I believe, where they used to play.
A field up in Douglas.
So
Yeah.
that field in Douglas was built. It's one of the oldest baseball fields in the United States still.
Wow.
The Douglas High School still uses it, and it's a beautiful field. My team actually practices on it once in a while, but yeah, it was one of the old mill team fields.
They told me that when they won the semi-pro world championship,
Give him a microphone. Give him a microphone.
Jen, can you pass him the microphone? Thank you.
Yeah.
Nello and Benny told me when they won the semi-pro world championship in Kansas City, I think it was, Nello pitched both ends of a doubleheader
Wow.
in 100-degree weather.
Sure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they had a big celebration on Depot Street. That's when they arrived back in Franklin.
Well, you know something? There's, again, more footage of the Chilson films. They show something happening, not so much on Depot Street, but by the town bridge. But they were kind of tracking what was happening and everything. And in fact, down on Depot Street, actually not on Depot Street, down by where the Sentinel building was, you could see results were coming in, and there were people all sitting around. There was loudspeakers outside. So something was being listened to very closely. Maybe it was that.
Yeah, there's a lot of photographs of that. Benny had him up at his office.
Yeah.
And it was fun to see.
Yeah.
So Harry Haywood, just getting back to this whole phenomenon, was originally from Uxbridge. And he owned mills in Uxbridge and Douglas before he bought the mill in Franklin
I
from
didn't know
Mackenzie. Yeah.
Okay.
And he sponsored the mill team that played at that field in Douglas.
Wow.
In 1946, when the Red Sox were preparing to go to the World Series, there was a week before the end of the season and the start of the World Series. Harry Haywood was good friends with Tom Yawkey, the owner of the Red Sox, and they negotiated to bring the New York Yankees up to play an exhibition game at that field against the Red Sox. So Ted Williams actually played there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Cool. And this is from 1943, and it shows the Strickland and Restaino market. Now, Henry Restaino, actually I'll show you a picture. Here's Ed Strickland and Henry Restaino. Now,
Oh, my God.
Now, Vargin's Market, I know Henry worked for Vargin's Market. Did they take Strickland and Restaino and that became Vargin's Grocery? Do you know? Or did Vargin's Grocery just start their own and you wouldn't know that? No? No. Okay.
Stewart always is Vargin's.
Oh, it was always Vargin's?
Brothers,
Okay.
yeah.
But Henry Restaino worked for them, so I figured maybe it was a connection. But,
Danny DeRico went and worked for them too after they.
Oh,
was
okay.
there.
yeah. Good. And then in March of 1945, Benny Gillinado bought the Electric Cafe on West Central Street from Andrea Priorello. Now you can see Andrea Priorello's name up on the sign there. Yep. In fact, I love what it says here, opening of the new Electric Cafe, completely renovated and refurnished under the management of Benny Gillinado. Benny will greet you at the bar. I know. A&D, yep, 9 West Central Street. That's back when if television was broken, they'd come in and repair it right in your home. And remember, there was one, I don't know if Dick Esterly worked for them or not, but he had his own business, I believe.
I hung with his son Steve, and he had a locked up area down cellar. That was his. And one time he left it unlocked, and no one was home. I went in there, and I was a young kid. And the tubes were everywhere.
Oh,
The
gee.
TVs meticulously taken apart on the work benches.
Yeah.
I was like, in my glory.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, he knew we went in there. He
Oh,
knew
yeah.
somebody touched something, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
We got bagged.
Well, how about the days when if you had a tube on your TV and you took it out and you brought it to Connie's drugstore and there was a machine right there and had all these different female plugs on it, and you looked for the one that matched your plug. We wanted to test your tube to see if it was broke or burnt. You plug it in, push the button. Oh, that tube's no good. Okay, open the door. Look for. Oh, there it is, and you buy a new tube. Working on your own TVs. I mean, you're taking your life in your hands back in those days.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
That's,
my
that's
God.
electrocution waiting to be
If
happened.
you didn't know what to touch, man. But. And then this picture was taken in the early 50s. And you can see Garrett Brothers has a billboard up on the top of the roof. And you can see the different stores, and Kaplan Shoe, Public Cleaners right there next door to where the barbershop was. Yeah,
It's Christmas time.
yeah, Christmas, yeah, that's right.
It's like they
Mighty
cover it.
Good down the street there too.
Uh-huh.
Mighty Good,
Oh, Mighty Good, absolutely, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
It looks like they covered up the trough with a Christmas tree of some kind.
yeah, yeah. Oh, there we go. That's the early 60s. That's a 59 Chevy right there, so doesn't look brand new though. So yeah, I'd say maybe it's later than early 60s. Well, Bonnie Kaplan went out of business in 63, so that's probably about 62 when that picture was. How many remember Urban Renewal? Oh yeah. Give him a microphone if you need it, because I'll tell you that was quite the thing. We lived on Dean Avenue, and my mother was really concerned because there was talk about tearing down a whole bunch of buildings downtown, and we were wondering if maybe our house was going to be included in that. But it turns out that Urban Renewal was shot down by the voters, anyways. But do you know anything more about that, John?
No,
No, you don't.
I
Yeah.
know it was a lot of bitter feelings.
Oh yeah, a lot of bitter
It was
feelings.
actually from the triangle, that whole block,
Yep.
all the way down to Connie's.
That's right. Well, you can see the triangle right there. That's where the town bridge. Yeah, it looks like Newberry's the depot block would have stayed, but the Exchange building would have been taken down. And this is West Central Street right here. You can see where the old A&P would have been gone, and all them, and the big parking lot in the back. Some of the buildings look like they would have survived. Dean would have survived.
I think that was 1962.
Yeah, it's the early 60s, yeah.
Says 65. Thursday, March 11th,
okay, yeah.
1965.
Yeah, that was the final proposal, and then they shot it down. Here's a really good picture taken in the mid-60s. You can see now, we talked about the facade of the building is the same as the rest of the building, and they really did a good job of recreating it, because it was only a year later, so that, you know, it was no problem. But you can see Bullock and Oil over there.
They know the cleaning place.
Yeah,
And then Mr. Landry had the jewelry shop.
right, yeah. I don't think he's related, but
From
yeah,
Woonsocket. He was from Woonsocket.
that's what I heard, yeah. W.B. Landry,
Yeah.
yeah. And Eddie's Restaurant, yeah. And then Brockton Taunton Gas Company was next to it. And,
This railroad watch, we gotta bring it up to Mr. Landry to be checked.
oh yeah, yeah.
Charlie Scott was in there someplace too.
Oh, Charlie Scott?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Because I know at one time he had a business, his shoe store down in the A.J. Cataldo block,
Right.
Scott's Shoe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Eddie's, I don't remember Eddie's.
you don't remember what?
Or Eddie's restaurant.
Eddie's, it was called Manny's at one time too.
It's where the Rome started, isn't it? Did the Rome start there?
No, no, the Rome was where it is today.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, before the Rome, it was Kami's restaurant.
Yeah.
Before that was Brunelli's Diner. Yeah. So, yeah. Any questions? Yeah, it's quite a block though. That's,
The change is incredible.
yeah.
I would have assumed, had I not known this, I would have assumed that building had been there for a lot longer than it had.
Yeah, 1920. Oh, in fact, we're in 2026, so it's 100 years old as of last year. Yeah. So, anybody got any more questions? Oh, yes.
I do have, you know.
Okay, give her a microphone.
Some of the
Names of, oh, sorry, some of the names of the businesses, like the Stewart, is that the same person that they named, you know, different streets after? Like Stewart Street and,
Possibly. I mean, there were a lot of streets in Franklin that were named for people that lived there, like Fales Street, was
Yeah.
Charles Fales.
yeah,
Landry Street, my great-grandfather.
right,
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of Hutchinson Street. I think a lot of the Hutchinsons, I think, owned it, or somebody named Hutchinson owned this property.
probably,
Yeah.
yeah.
It could have been a relative of yours, right?
no?
Yeah.
My father came from Nova Scotia.
Oh,
so-
did he? Oh, okay. Different Hutchinsons then.
But there was a Hutchinson that was a painter that lived on East Central Street.
Oh.
John.
Okay.
John Hutchison, yeah.
So, yeah.
Jan, you had a question?
Yep. Give her a mic.
Jan?
Thank you. When was Clark Square named?
When was it named? Well, it was named after Lawrence Clark.
Right.
Died in World War I. In fact, he died almost a couple of days before the war ended, I think. And it was, I'm not sure if it's a few years after, but at some point they did. I seem to have a newspaper clipping somewhere where they did talk about when they dedicated it. I'm sure it was within 10 years after he died, I think.
Yeah, he died in 1918.
1918. yeah.
And he's buried actually in Franklin, even though he was killed in France.
Well,
He's
yeah.
buried with his mother and two of his siblings.
Okay.
I was
And I
just
know
doing
exactly
some
where.
research.
Yeah. And when
Yeah.
you're coming down the cemetery, if you're of the far end, if you're just coming to the stop, boom, it's right there. If you're walking on the sidewalk on St. Mary's Cemetery, in front of the cemetery, and the cemetery's here, and you come to the last road, you can just stand there and look, and there it is, right there, Lawrence Clark. Yeah. Yep, right there. Yep. So, any other questions or comments or?
One of those buildings on West Central Street, where you mentioned the bakery and all that,
Yep.
as I remember, there was a small building right next to where the Electric Cafe is.
Yep.
And there was a fellow by the name of Adrian Fitzgerald that ran a TV repair shop
Yep.
in there.
Yep.
And he was a musician also, I think. And I went to school with his daughter, Jeannie.
Okay.
And I think his brother John was a cop in Franklin.
Okay.
Pretty sure.
I know exactly the building. In an upcoming presentation, we'll talk about that.
Oh.
When we talk about other buildings on West Central Street, I kind of group a bunch of them.
Yeah.
That building had like these 3 windows in the front, like shaped like arches. So, for lack of a better word, I call it the 3-arch building.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're going to talk about that building. But yeah, there was different businesses in there. In the 40s, I think there was a little gas station right in front of it. At one point, there was, I think, also a Walton, I think, that had a...
Across the street was Waddy Young's gas station.
Exactly, yep. That'll be one of them we'll talk about.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
The old A&P, obviously, and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, that building, that 3-arch building, at one time there was a cleaners in there, too.
I don't
I don't think
remember
they
that.
did the actual cleaning there, but I think it was in the
Harry and
50s.
Tony had that little tailor shop.
Oh, but that was across the street, yeah. Harry, yep. Yeah, we'll talk about that one in a future presentation. Yeah, Waddy Young had the gas station, and a guy named Carl Harris owned in fact, the old A&P building was a 40-car garage, actually. It was built for that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we'll talk about that in a
didn't know
future
that.
presentation.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow.
So, I guess that's it. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, folks.
Okay.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.